Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining the cozy session. um, Today we are going to talk about vaccines and the role of patient community leaders in enhancing patient involvement in vaccines development and rollout. And we have these wonderful speakers today. So before moving into the multi-stakeholder roundtable, and just a reminder of some housekeeping rules, just to be present and try to engage. And yeah, I think you have seen this already many times these days. So we will start with a short introduction, and then we will have a multi-stakeholder roundtable, following by a co-creation activity, and we will have probably one table here in the center. And we will try to share experiences and come up with some takeaways and priorities. And we will close with some conclusions and reflections.
Hello. So what are we going to learn today? First of all, we are going to learn about the key stages across the research and development pathway of vaccines. Then we are going to identify together opportunities for meaningful patient involvement and community engagement. Then we are going to discuss about trust barriers, vaccine hesitancy, and how these relate to issues in recruitment and retention in clinical trials. And finally, we're going to develop together practical strategies for science-informed advocacy. For example, through tackling misinformation, enhancing collaboration across different stakeholder groups, and enhancing literacy in vaccines for the different groups involved. I think we can move to the slide, yeah? So we want to understand your experience with vaccines and also more or less who is in the room. So we invite you to scan this QR code and reply to some questions. Can we closer? Yeah? You cannot hear me. Fine. Okay. Okay. Industry. Oh, patient organizations. Other. What is this other? Other. Okay. Patient organization is going up. Has everyone voted? Okay, I guess we can go to the next question. Yeah. Oh, the next question, yeah, thank you. Okay, what best describes your experience with vaccines or vaccine research? Yeah. Yeah. The eye. Yeah, great. I have been vaccinated. Okay, involved in raising awareness, communicating about vaccines. Okay, thank you. We can move on, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So we are moving into a multi-stakeholder roundtable to have different perspectives. We will have 3 speakers that are here with us and 1 speaker that is online. So, okay. Today we are the pleasure to have Giorgio Barbareschi from EADG and Beatriz Mote Pujadas from Iris Kasha HIV Research Institute that she will be online. And we also have Charlotte Burns from Vaccines Europe. And so we will start with Charlotte. And Daniela. Sorry. So, yeah, Charlotte.
Thank you for the introduction. I guess if we can pull up the slides. Yes. Okay, I'm shifting the slides. Excellent. Thanks for attending this session on vaccines and vaccine development and patient engagement. It's really a pleasure to be here at PIOF, and it's my second time here. And I see that the topic of vaccines is one that is not usually part of the agenda. And it's, to me, as someone who's been working in R&D for vaccines in 15 years, it's a surprise because vaccines is everyone's business, but it's also no one's business. And I think there's really a lack of realization of the role of vaccines in our lives, in protecting ourselves, our families, our communities. And so it's, I think, important to have these types of sessions because I think patients have a really strong voice in showing the value of vaccines and also bringing the lived experience to the discussion. So I'm Charlotte Verne. I work at Vaccines Europe, where I'm Director of Scientific and Medical Affairs. And Vaccines Europe is a trade association that represents 14 vaccine companies innovating in the field. So, as always, it's good to start with definitions because we realize when we talk to different people, sometimes we have different understanding of what we're talking about. So starting with what a vaccine is, so it's typically a product that trains the immune system to produce a response against a specific threat. And so historically, those were infectious disease vaccines targeting a pathogen, whether it's a virus, a bacteria, or a parasite, for example. But now more and more, we talk about using the vaccine technologies to target other elements, such as a cancer cell, to try to destroy it. And so in this case, it would be a cancer vaccine. The specificity here is that you're training the immune system to build a response. Vaccines can be, as most of the vaccines you know, prophylactic or preventative. You provide them to the person in advance of encountering the threat so they're protected when they see it again. But more and more we see therapeutic vaccines coming to the market or to the clinical trials. And these vaccines, they can treat diseases or infections. Why is that important? We see more and more that certain conditions can remain chronic in life. You can have chronic infections. Certain viruses can stay in your body for your entire life. And so if you want to control the infection, having a vaccine can help. Finally, now we often talk about immunization rather than vaccination. And why is that? It's because in addition to vaccines that induce an active immune response where you build the response against the pathogen, there's also now monoclonal antibodies, the short name is mAbs, that confer what we call a passive immune response. So you just get the antibodies right away. They will protect you, but for a certain period of time, and your body hasn't learned to build its own antibodies. So that's the major difference. And there's a lot of different types of immunization technologies. I haven't captured them all here, but overall, these are the different categories. You have what is called whole virus-based, where you take a whole virus and either you inactivate it or you attenuate it. You can use that virus shell as a vector, put whatever you want in it and use it as a delivery mechanism. That's a viral vector. You can use a piece of the virus, maybe a protein on the surface, and that will be a subunit-based vaccine. that will be very specifically a protein vaccine. But there's other pieces of the virus or bacteria you can use that the body will recognize and mount a response to. Nucleic acid vaccines, you've heard about the mRNA vaccines during the pandemic. This is newer technology, but actually not that new. It's been developed for decades. Most people just don't know about it. And then there's what we call bacterial vesicle or particle platforms. It's basically using, mimicking what the bacteria does and the bacteria shape, so the body recognizes it and mounts a response. And then finally, so all of those are vaccines, and we have the monoclonal antibodies I was talking about. Sometimes you can combine these with an adjuvant. What the adjuvant does is to really show the body, hey, this is the piece you need to build a response to. And so it's particularly useful when you have just a small piece of virus or bacteria, a protein, to elicit the response, because otherwise it would get lost in the picture. So this is a quick look at the vaccine life cycle from discovery to post-marketing surveillance. I'm not going to go into all the details, but key messages are that it's long, it's complicated, because you start with discovery, which is understanding the pathogen, the disease, how your body responds to it, if it protects you or not, designing the vaccine, but also starting then after this discovery phase to assess it in cell and animal models, and that's the preclinical, non-clinical safety evaluation. And once you've shown safety at that level, then you can go into humans, and that's your phase 1. Phase 1 is a year and a half, sometimes a little bit more, in 20 to 200 subjects. And the main objective is to show it's safe in humans and to start measuring the immune response you have after vaccination. Once you've done that, you go to phase 2, 2 or more years, and here you're already in 100 to 2,000 people. And you try to continue building this database of safety and immune response. You start seeing a little bit, maybe the dose, the number of doses you need. You start optimizing the vaccine schedule. The big piece is the phase 3. And this is very long and very expensive because you have to show efficacy. Because most vaccines are preventative, you vaccinate some of the people, you don't vaccinate others, and you wait. You wait until you have enough difference in the number of cases between the two groups that you can say, okay, the vaccine prevents this many cases. And so that means you need a very large population. Here I have 3,000 to 50,000. But actually, recently I was reading a paper of a rotavirus vaccine trial that was in 70,000 people. And so this is why those large trials are long and expensive, and also why we usually run them in healthy populations, because it would be very hard to find immunocompromised patients, 70,000 of them to be included in a trial. Then is registration. So here it's in Europe, but we also have in other regions of the world, obviously. And post-marketing surveillance. Here, what's important is to remember that throughout its life, a vaccine will be monitored for its efficacy, for its safety. There's pharmacovigilance throughout the life of the vaccine. And so that takes a lot of people to collaborate. It's not something you do on your own, and because vaccines are public health, you need to have a lot of actors involved from the very beginning. How can we know there's a problem? How can we know about the disease if there's no surveillance? And so that's the very beginning. And if you want to design a good solution, you need to know what virus or bacteria, what disease, in which populations, and that takes a lot of work as well. So throughout the development, you have different people involved, but the key question is, what about patients? What about people? When are they involved? They're, people in general, healthy subjects usually are part of clinical trials. And we know that no vaccine will be able to do its job if it's not administered, if people don't choose to get vaccinated. But there's often a voice missing here. So that's why we're here today also. So we know in certain therapeutic areas, patient voice has been, going for a long time and is a strong voice and plays a central role. But in vaccines, not as much. In infectious diseases, not as much. And why? Well, we've all had a cold, we've all had the flu probably, but it's short-lived and we don't think about it after we've had it. Vaccination is often used in prevention, tested in healthy subjects. So it's very different than when you have a disease and you go get a treatment. One pathogen can cause several diseases in different populations. And so that also complicates this advocacy. And then immunization is a population level intervention rather than individual. But we know that those infectious diseases, they can lead to long-term consequences. And for people who already have diseases or conditions they're living with, they're at higher risk of infection. The more they tend to have more complications, it can complicate their own disease or the management of their disease and the quality of life. And vaccine recommendations may vary depending on pre-existing conditions. And more recently, we've seen some examples of patient involvement in vaccine development from patient groups who have a focus on infectious diseases and their impact. There's been a great campaign from Sanofi on meningitis involving Paralympic athletes and a designer who designed the flag. They all worked together. And this was really a message of, I think most people don't realize that these people weren't born with their disability, but became disabled because of an infectious disease. The RSV patient network is composed of parents whose children had severe RSV disease and were hospitalized, or for some, sadly, passed away. Rachel on the left tells the story of losing her son. And that's both inspired the researchers who were in this European consortium, but also helped people understand what this disease is and why it's a problem, and maybe once there's immunization available, why they should immunize their children. So there's many different examples of patient involvement in research and development. In vaccines, it's just starting, but this paper came from the same European project. And what the patient group did, they helped secure financial resources by co-authoring grants, proposals, saying, okay, this is an important topic that has a serious impact for people. They improved clinical trial recruitment and retention rate by advising researchers on the feasibility, by improving the language so that it was more understandable, but also they have a really important role in educating not only fellow patients or patient advocates, but also healthcare providers, researchers, policymakers, and the general public. And I think this is just the beginning, but there's more that can be done. And the publication is here. It was published in the Journal of Infectious Disease. With that, I'm going to pass on to Beatrice, who's online, and thank you for your attention. I hope the scene setter helped define a little bit the terms.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for the invitation. I'm very sorry not to be there. I'm located in Tiana, very close to Barcelona. So probably the same heat as you're living with these days. But well, thanks, Charlotte, for the nice introduction. I think my talk is going to try to link the knowledge that you provided with the experience from EDTG later on. So I'm a little bit on the middle of those two parts. So I will give you a little bit of background on where I'm working on. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So I'm here next, located very close to the Barcelona area. Next, please. Next. Yeah. So this is I'm working on a university hospital. This is our health campus. Next, please. And basically, there's a lot of research going around within the campus, both in infectious diseases, in oncology, well, in all the areas. This is a tertiary hospital, so you can imagine that we touch base many diseases, and we have several research institutions. So if you go next, please. So basically, next, if you see, I took it from Charlotte's talk. Next, please. What is our participation in that vaccine long life cycle? So would be in these probably first steps on the R&D process, which is all this disease surveillance, understanding what a pathogen does, what's the burden of that disease, doing a lot of clinical research on the immune mechanisms behind that disease, behind that consequences of that infection. And then we do a lot of that clinical research that Charlotte was mentioning is basically done in many academic institutions like us, which are located in health campus. We do from phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4. And then we also have a role when it comes to the vaccination, because it's not only developing a vaccine, but then it comes to the vaccination process. So hospitals and academic institutions have a great role on that, on implementing those vaccine programs, and of course on that surveillance on the vaccine safety on the long term. And as Charlotte was mentioning, where we are very used to have patient involvement in many of our clinical research, but it's true that when it comes to vaccine research, sometimes it's much more difficult, basically because we are not talking about patients, we're talking about people without living a certain condition that we want to prevent. And in the hospitals, we have patients already living with those conditions. So for us, sometimes it's difficult to engage people without those conditions. But we have, no, just stay on the before slide, sorry. So, but we have the experience before, please. The preceding slide. Well, this is going to be a little bit difficult, sorry for that. So basically what we have in the hospitals is a lot of people living with immunosuppressive conditions. And those immunosuppressive conditions, as Charlotte was saying, is going basically to drive a vaccine response or a response to the vaccination very different from people that do not have those conditions, and probably are the people that is going to be a major target population when it comes to the rollout of those vaccines. So we have vaccines that are given in pediatrics to prevent the diseases, but it's true that we have a lot of vaccines that are given when you're getting older, or you have an immunosuppressive conditions that you're living with to prevent a worse outcome of that disease. So we have the opportunity to engage in this type of development. And this is the example that I want to bring today to the table. So if you go now to the next slide, please. So, and why we want to do that? Because we realize that not including immunosuppressed people in the vaccine development is a great part of the inequity in clinical trial development. There are many factors in having inequity in clinical trials. It can be social behavioral factors, demographic and cultural factors, of course, and disease-related factors. And those disease-related exclusions, the scientists that we are located in these type of academic institutions, I think we have a great opportunity to try to reduce those inequities. If you go to the next slide, please. So I will show you the example that probably Georgia and Daniela will also expand on our previous collaboration, and that was during the pandemic. You can remember what the different outcomes were experienced people living with immunocompromising situations in the natural history of COVID. So we had that they were living with a high incidence of infection, there was a high risk of death, there was a prolonged viral shedding, the viral rebound after the antiviral treatment, and more individuals were experiencing chronic infection and consequences of the initial acquisition of the SARS-CoV-2. So definitely, next please, there was a clearly gap that we had to test the safety and the efficacy of the treatments and vaccines in the most needed. Next, please. And as soon as possible. As Charlotte was mentioning before, sometimes all the vaccine development is first done in healthy individuals and then is rolled over to the immunocompromised. But we had a pandemic super fast, super global, affecting a lot of people, and we had to be fast on that. We could not wait 3 years after the vaccines were rolled over to start doing studies in the immunocompromised populations. So we had that ambition, and we tried to move it forward. So if you go next, please. And we were clearly realizing what Charlotte was mentioning. So people that were suffering or were at risk of having more severe COVID diseases were the less represented in all the pivotal trials that were being run during the pandemic with the first COVID vaccines. They were not underrepresented. They were even excluded in most of the initial trials. So we had that major disbalance that all the data that we were gathering with those vaccines that were being rapidly implemented at the population level, they have not been tested in the population with higher risk. So go next, please. This has a lot of consequences, right? There was a scientific limitation. We were not generating the data on those most at risk. That could have an implication on the social trust and participation because they were totally excluded on that. And this also brings ethical and social importance consequences. So if you go to the next. This is why we work together with ETG and a pharmaceutical company called IPRA that is located here in Spain, that they were already developing a different type of COVID vaccine based on a recombinant protein. Okay, so we proposed them to participate in an European call that was launched in 2021. Okay, so just after the first vaccines were rolled over to the population, and we got enough funding to done a phase 2 trial with hundreds of individuals living with a range of different immunocompromising conditions, and to test the safety and do a very deep immunology analysis of the different conditions and how they were responding to the vaccination. Of course, the program was launched in 2021. The trials were starting in 2022. So these were the first booster vaccination studies that were being performed because the vaccines were, if you remember, were rolled over in 2021. So this was people that had already received a primary vaccination regimen with the mRNA vaccines, which were the ones that arrived to the market, and these individuals were going to get the first booster vaccination in 2022. If you go to the next slide, please. And why are they challenging those clinical studies in adults or in pediatric population as well, living with immunosuppressive conditions? Well, because there's a lot of heterogeneity between these conditions. You can have an underlying condition by itself, an inborn condition. You can be treated with an immunosuppressive condition because you're having a cancer or you're having a transplantation, so you need to receive anti-rejection therapy, or you have an autoimmune disease that already doesn't allow you to produce antibodies, and then you're receiving antibodies passively, for instance, or on the contrary, you have an autoimmune disease that you need to suppress your immune system through some treatments that are going to deplete totally your B cells, and you're not going to be able to induce antibodies. No, so definitely the vaccines are going to respond very work very differently in each of these populations. This is difficult. This is a challenge, and it's money, and it's a lot of immunologists behind, and it's a lot of patient help to recruit all these different conditions. So it was very challenging. If you go to the next slide, please. And of course, there is a lot of feasibility and operational challenges, not only the immune part. So the recruitment is much slower because you have a smaller eligible groups. No, as Charlotte was mentioning, it's not the same going to 70,000 healthy adults than going in 200 individuals, but that you need to have 50 adults with transplantation, 50 adults with lupus, 50 adults with HIV, with this, and that conditions. That it's much more challenging in terms of recruitment. You need to consider a lot of ethical concerns because these people is already living with a condition and have a lot of medical treatment and a lot of medical visits because of their condition. So you can maybe not use placebos, controls because they are high risk, because they are already receiving MAPS or other vaccines that can interact with what you are testing. So it's totally different scenario that a vaccine trial developed in healthy individuals. And operationally is also very much more complex because you need to have a much more intense monitoring because you're going to be reporting a lot of safety data. Probably it's not related to the vaccination, it's related to the condition, but you need to report and you need to follow it. So that also takes a lot of operational work. If you go to the next, please. So, and then when it comes to the endpoints, maybe the endpoint that you're measuring in your vaccine trial in a healthy population has nothing to do with the endpoint that you need to measure in a trial with immunosuppressive condition. So you need, as I was mentioning before, to put a lot of immunologists on the table from different areas of expertise. And sometimes, these type of trials are done more on I want a biomarker, I want to have a titer of antibody that determines the protection, and that's it. Because this is how can I do the study in 70,000 people. Yeah, but this scenario is completely different. So this is what we did in this European project, thanks to the funding that we get from the EU. And if you go click next, please. Here, this is what we built with different academic institutions in our campus and in the Barcelona area. So we put together immunologists from the humoral part, cellular part. We were doing transcriptomics. We're doing a lot of what it may look fancy things, but is to really understand how these individuals are responding to vaccination and how we can improve those responses and that protection to the disease. If you go to the next one. Very important questions. For instance, the longitudinal assessment. Know how long is going to remain that response. Maybe this is not just an academic question. This really informs when those individuals will get the booster, either every 6 months, every 1 year. So you need to run these studies. If you go to the next slide, please. And just very simple question. Safety, tolerability. In our study, this is a real data from our study, 250 people with different conditions. Safety, tolerability is totally different depending on the condition that you're living with, both in the severity and both in the number of cases that we were having. If you don't do these studies, you don't never get that information. And then you have a leaflet of your side effects of the vaccination that has just been tested in healthy individuals and has nothing to do with what can experience really the people that is going to be getting that vaccine every 6 months. If you go to the next slide. And finally, just to conclude, I think this is a very important question that we need the help on and the patient involvement to push to get those studies earlier in the vulnerable populations because they are very easily excluded from many of these R&D programs. We know that it's more complex, of course, but we are there and we can help. And with the needed funding, I think we can do a great job because those living with those evidence gaps has consequences on people's lives, of course. And of course, there's this an imperative, I think, ethical and scientific imperative. And how we can do that? So not only having the funding allocated for that, and if you go to the next slide, is with really patient engagement. So all this program was possible because we had the opportunity to collaborate with an institution such as an ETG, that they are going also now to walk through what they did in that program. They help us to really reach all those populations, to make all these difficulties of those type of clinical trials easier, and they help us in all the journey of the clinical trial before, during, and after. And so I will really thank of their involvement, because if not, this investigation would have not been possible. So I will leave it here. And I think now it's the time for ETG to talk about what they did on that project. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bea.
So, well, thank you very much for joining this session, and thanks a lot to the previous presenters, because we are really prepared the ground for what the focus of this meeting, which is the community engagement. And we are presenting, my name is Giorgio Barbareschi, I'm from the European AIDS Treatment Group, presenting together with Daniela Rojas, who is the chair of the board of director of EATG, but even more importantly, she was a part of the community advisory panel, which was an important element in the work we have been doing within the project. So EATG is truly a patient-led organization, meaning that there is direct participation from the members. We are about 160 people, members, representing the interest of the people living with HIV across the WHO Europe countries area. And we have almost like 4 decades, more than 3 decades of history in treatment advocacy. I'm really happy we had the presentation from Beatrix before, because this is really actually the example of the kind of challenges we go through as a community in participating in this kind of projects. The complexity of the scientific, the work that is put in, and also we started with a challenge like the name of the project, which is called RBD-COV, was really something that really needed a lot of attention in terms of how we explain that, even internally to our organization, what does it mean, and what is a dimer recombinant protein? How does the mechanism work in terms of science? So we really started. It was made quite in a rush, because the funding scheme that was given by the European Commission required very short deadlines in terms of submitting the proposal. So we were joining this consortium with a lot of questions and a lot of doubts on how we could really provide meaningful input in this project. But anyway, I think the trust building process started really from the beginning. We were really offered a lot of space within the consortium. And also the fact that we were working outside of our comfort zone. Indeed, we had experience on treatment advocacy, but we didn't really have a lot of experience on vaccines, and within the HIV field, the vaccine history was not very successful. So we were really coming with, okay, are we really well equipped to do this? But also the fact that they were focusing on underserved population, it really gave a sense of meaningfulness. You know, like we had to find an alliance with other communities. So, yeah, as we say, this is the main theme of these 3 days. You know, there is never enough patient engagement. So, and in the vaccine trials is something that we are still trying to find our fit. So we were feeling like that was very much respected in this kind of collaboration, as we have a full work package where it was given into our hands. So definitely it was like we trust the community in terms of working on what they know to do, which was community engagement. The partner collaboration was really, well, there was like a moment we needed to do some work in terms of really creating these collaborations. There was an openness from the other partners, but also from our side. So it was a kind of mutual exchange we really need to put in the process. And also we were asked to bring, you know, to give more space and more light to the experience of the participants. That was really some kind of like clear feedback that was required from the community. You are the community, you can talk to the participants, you can try to get back you know, the real experience they have in the process of this project. So this is an example. It was one of the first meetings in Girona, and my colleagues, Rocco was part of the team at the time, and they were meeting at the premises of IPRA, which was the industry partner, and they were invited to, well, we discussed that and we say it's a good idea to go to the lab and have, you know, like direct experience to see how it works. And I think really helped to create cohesions. Also, the community advisory panel, which is the mechanism we are used to, it's the kind of panel we create to engage with industry partner, with researchers, was also new for us, because at that point we had to invite people from from people representing other patients' organizations. So it was really a moment of trust building. And the community advisory panel was really like the structure that really was bringing the voice of the community in the work we were doing within the project. So they were providing feedback every time there was new documents coming out. We were saying, well, please, can we pass along to the community advisory panel? We need to have like their input. And sometimes it was just being aware that this material was developed. Other times there were questions coming up, you know, and then we had another call to clarify the question, the doubts, and so on. So there was a direct feedback on the trial design and the protocol, which helped in a way to provide a clear vision how to proceed with the recruitment. There was question about the dosing, the follow-up visits, and so on. So the participation and safety of the participants. Also, there was a cultural aspect. Feedback was given on the trials were conducted in 2 countries. So we managed to have representatives from these 2 countries, which were Spain and Turkey. And also the regulatory system might be different, how to engage with the participants. There were questions, we could go back directly to the investigators in the different countries and so on. And the language part was also very important. I think that was really one of the elements that was, for us, very determining how much the information was given back to the participants, and also how much respectful was of the communities that were involved. So these are other examples of how the community input influenced the process of the changes within the material that was developed in the clinical trials. Again, attentions to the language. There were still sometimes we quote in the documents the word patient, which is also very strange in the context of vaccines, although we're people living with condition, but our advocacy point is that you are part of a trial. You are an active presence, so giving back a bit more these human active elements. So communication was very important. So I'm passing now to Daniela to give a more in detailed description about what we did on the psychosocial part.
Yeah. So inside this trial, they have this great idea of collecting the voices of the participants. And I think that that was amazing. I think that for the future is something that we should do before, but it was already great that we could do it. And as you can see, what we were doing is to see how they live the fact of participating in this trial, why they were coming to participate, and what meant for them. And one of the phrases that we choose to represent this study is this trial wasn't just about us, it was for us. And I am talking about the people living with immunocompromising condition. That is something that they don't experience very often. So we had 54 online questionnaires and then 15 interviews. And what we wanted to know why people were coming to this trial. This is not something natural. Coming to a trial is not, you don't get people and say, hey, I'm willing to go for a trial. So we need to know what brings people so we can develop better campaigns in the future and better understand what are the mechanisms why people want to participate. We also wanted to know what were their concerns, because even if you're willing to participate, of course you need to have information on what is going to happen, what are the risks, how it's going to work. And so we ask about this, and also about the satisfaction with the clinical and the research staff, and not only about the vaccine itself or the clinical outcomes. And we also wanted to evaluate the knowledge and perceptions of vaccine development, because this is something that we need to enlarge, not only for the participants, but in the future. And I think really that RBDCOV is an experience that should learn, show to others how to work on this. And then to drive lessons to strengthen this participant-centered approach in future R&D. Regarding motivation, there are a lot of results, and I invite you to visit the report that is on the website. But here what I want to focus in is the motivation. So I think that there was this giving back to other communities that have participated in clinical trials. So when you see if someone has done research, that's why I have the treatments I get today. So it's time for me also to collaborate for other people in the future. Of course, there were something about the individual protection, but it was at the same level to support research and science. So there is a kind of mix between this generosity and also of individual interest, which are not incompatible at all. We are talking about a few years ago, so there is also something about the new COVID-19 vaccine. So it was also there was a lot of health literacy among the people that were participating in this trial. So they wanted to know more. And then there was also curiosity, of course, this advantage of having a medical follow-up and accessing information before than others. And you can see there in the graph, in the image, that it was something about contributing to research on their own condition. So it's something also about helping the own community of participants. Regarding how they understand the study and the vaccine, there were great things and not so great things. So, for example, regarding the formal understanding, it was clear that, 95% say that they received all the necessary information. And they found that 87% this information was clear and understandable. They understood perfectly how the vaccine was going to be administered and how was going to happen the blood sample process. But when we ask about more deeper comprehension on the vaccine, we saw, for example, that some people believed that the vaccine that they were getting in the trial was identical to prior vaccine. So there was some lack of knowledge of the fact that they were participating in a clinical trial, and that was not a typical vaccine. But also there was something about, I am not reading all the documents that I am provided because maybe I don't need it. And there was a lot of feedback, for example, saying, if my doctor is proposing me to get in this, I go, I trust them. This is something that we can discuss, if it's something good or not, but it was the case. Regarding the experience, we ask about, before you decide to get in here, were you concerned? Did you have concern about your participation? And we see that 40% of people that are participating in a clinical trial have concerns. So I don't want to imagine what are the concerns of people that are not participating in clinical trials. And what were the most prominent concerns? Well, the side effects, of course, and then the efficacy. But side effects are more important than the efficacy. And I think that all this information is something that we really need to get out and do it in a more global way, because this is what can help to other vaccine trials know. We were very interested in the respect and how the people were treated, and they were really, 92% agree that they were really treated with respect, and they were supported along the trial.
Yes, thank you. And this is to give you a glimpse. There is more. So there were many tools that were developed within the project. Again, with the direct collaboration of the community advisory panel. So we felt towards the end of the project that there was the need to feedback directly to the participants. So we had a meeting with the researchers and the industry partners, and really discussed like how can we create a language summary that is really easy to use and really bring up the main messages to the participants. So we have this meeting and we took back the core messages, which was used to feedback the community advisory panel, put it at work, and then at the end we had a very straightforward summary for the different communities involved, telling them what was the core messages, and also this was translated in different languages. Then we had a final meeting where we reached out to the other communities and the other partners who were working in other European initiatives focused on underrepresented group. For instance, with READY, UPATI was invited. So we tried to mobilize a bit the conversation and have this kind of outreach that the work has been done was also available for and visible for other communities and partners. And also we wanted to have a bit of feedback. So we really organized the meeting in order to have like an evaluation. What are the main values of this project? And we went through the different outcomes of the project. So we also developed like more kind of visual and easy to follow kind of discussion where the community, the members of the community advisory panel were interviews and different videos were developed, and also the Beatrix as the main point as a researcher. She presented her experience. And this can be, if you can scan the QR code and you will see, you can look at the videos afterwards. So that was also to give more kind of an active perspective and direct feedback, easy to understand. So there were many resources, 13 resources that can be found again in the QR code here. We organized them in a toolbox. so that they could be easy to reach, easy to use, and to adapt for it's material that can be adapted for the future research. In case it's really dedicated to community engagement in research, particularly in vaccine research. So this is the structure of the toolbox, which is also has been adapted in different languages. These are the resources within the toolbox. So I really invite you to surf on the website. And it's also publicly available. That was the intention, and it's designed for replications. So if you still don't understand how the mechanism of the vaccines work, I really invite you to also look within the toolbox, and we have this kind of comics, which was a creative solution and was particularly dedicated to there was also a group of adolescents and children in one of the trials. So we really tried to structure the information in a way that was accessible to these populations. And it really took a long time because we were really unhappy about what we saw coming out as a communication. It was dull, it was really not breaking down the language in a proper way. So I think this was very kind of success outcome from the study. And for the conclusion.
Why it matters? Because it's better. When we are talking about engagement, there are a lot of challenges for the communities and also for the researchers. There are challenges for everybody. But I think that the main conclusion is that that time and energy provides you much more pertinent data, more quality data, and things that can be used in the future. So we earn time. We can, when communities engage, we can bring insight that is going to help to the recruitment, that is going to help to the retention, that is going to help to the quality of the comprehension of the study. We are going to help to include representative of different communities that are not so easy to reach. We can bring other skills that are not the one of clinicians, that is psychosocial research, social science research. And then there is something about this trust that is built. So I think that the conclusion is this kind of collaborative approach brings better results. And I think that at the end it's about this. We all have the same interest. So we need to know how we can bring a brick to build this building together. And there is something that if we are given the place, we can do it. And I just want to do a reflection on what Charlotte was saying. I think that there is something also about public health literacy that we need to develop among all the communities for understanding the vaccine, but that was the discussion maybe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I wanted to say thank you, Charlotte, Giorgio, Bea, and Daniela for your presentations. We have 20 minutes for a breakout. We had some questions prepared, and we have questions, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, everyone? Okay. So I had a few questions. So the first one I'd like to tackle maybe is the safety reporting by the population, not through the study or the clinical trial, but the community reporting. And a lot of people don't know that we can as a population, as citizens, report to certain bodies, and whether you think that is of utility or not at all. But I think it is important that the population reports back on safety after. Pharmacovigilance is not only for the study, but for the population. If you would agree or not, I'd love to hear your thoughts. And I think that was the most pressing one. I really like the part about also how you concluded with health literacy. And when you were talking about reporting back to participants, I think also reporting back to the community you highlighted here, which was really, I appreciate that a lot. I just wanted to see the access to this information to the community. Do you feel that that is sufficient as well in the community and to the population as a whole? But for me, it was the real world reporting that was interesting to know more about.
Yes, maybe I can answer the first part quickly. Definitely, pharmacovigilance is in population, but often I think this is where we get to the public health literacy, right? I think most people are not aware of this. And when I was in industry, we had compliance training that if anyone on the street, anyone in your family tells you about, oh, I had this effect with a vaccine, you have to report it within 24 hours. It's not only your company's vaccine, it's any vaccine. So we get that training, but people in the community, people who get vaccinated, they're not aware of it. And I think this is the piece of literacy that's also missing, and that's so crucial. So completely agree.
So thank you. About reporting back to the community, I think it was a piece of work we took in consideration quite at the end of the projects, because we were saying, okay, we have achieved this, and then what? I think it was, and then we really, you saw the image, we really had to sit down and to discuss. I know that the EMA now is asking for the lay summaries to be produced, but then was like, we need to have the discussion together in order to create something that is meaningful for all the communities. So in the beginning it was like, okay, we can create a general summary for the project, but then we were thinking, what about people with autoimmune disease or people who had like a kidney transplant compared to people living with HIV, which was the main representation there. So how do we differentiate so we really felt that that was something that we have to give back to them. In terms of how we make that visible, yes, that's a really good question. We still feel that in terms of disseminations, the material is there, but we deal with the resources we have. We try to, as I said, at the end, we try to have as many events or, using different tools to reach out to and this is also an opportunity to do that. But I think we need to have more kind of investment in that sense.
But if I can add something, I think that is not only about, we were able to produce this restitution, but then again, we need people to go to look for it actively. And this is something that is a different process that I think that is much more linked to this public health literacy, but also about the engagement of the participants from the very beginning. I think that in RBDCOF we were building during the process, we have learned a lot of things. And I think, for example, that all the participants should be safe from the very beginning. There will be communications in these places, blah, blah, blah. You can go to look for them, It's not about, here is the restitution. Because, and even though we will have to see who is going to be interested to go to look for these restitution materials and why. So a lot of work to do.
We're going to switch things up, I understand.
Yes, we are going to switch things up a little bit, but I think there was another question in the audience. Yeah.
I do have two random questions. I'm sorry. So know that this is the first time that I learned about vaccines, and thank you so much. This has been amazing, and I would love to ask you way more than 2 questions, but I have 2 curiosities. One is, you've mentioned people living with immunosuppressive conditions, and you've mentioned specifically the ethical considerations around the limited use of placebo. And I was wondering how that compares to other perhaps therapeutic areas. What came to mind is cancer. If standard of care as of now gives me 2 years of life and then you give me a placebo and I die in 3 months, is that ethical? So then I'm wondering if they figured out ways to somehow manage this, and if there is anything that we can learn, or if there is anything that you can share. And then my second question is a bit more broad than this, considering the current geopolitical context and the attacks, especially towards vaccines. What do you think we should all do to make sure that people actually trust science? What's the role that we could all play?
Shall I answer the first one?
Yes.
So for the first one, you're totally right. I mean, ethical considerations when you're doing the clinical trial designs are very important, and they are very different depending on the study population. So specifically for the the groups that we were considering to include in the RBD-COP, the HH4 trial that I was explaining, the thing is that this was conceived as a booster vaccine. Because the primary all these individuals had been already received the primary vaccination. So at the beginning, we were considering of doing booster versus no booster. But when we were designing the study, already the recommendations appear that all these individuals should start getting a booster vaccination. So then it was impossible to have a placebo. There was no way, because as you were mentioning, if the standard of care is recommending that everyone is getting a booster, we could not do a booster trial without that the participants. So we designed the study being open label, everyone was getting the shot, and basically we were measuring the differences in the immune profiles before and after vaccination. But we could not compare of getting a vaccine versus not getting a vaccine, which is the regular way of doing this type of trials when you do it in healthy populations. And this is very different depending on the disease, depending on the treatment that you are getting. Then, for instance, if you remember, during that period, they appeared some maps, some monoclonal antibodies that they were given to individuals that were not responding to vaccinations. So we could not exclude if some participants were candidates for those treatments. We could not say, no, don't get it because you are participating on my study. So we had to control for that. So we had to register all the participants that received those treatments and then do different analyses for those that they get those maps versus the ones that they didn't get. That's why I was saying it's much more complex to run studies, but that's not the excuse for not doing them. It's just that you need more investment and you need more multidisciplinary teams. But yes, this is very great examples of how you need to adapt the studies in this type of populations. And many of those questions are ethical, totally.
And
Thank you.
your second question was, can you remind us?
The second question was, considering how in the current global community vaccines are being attacked, is there anything that you think we could do as part of the community to help counter this narrative and balance it?
I'm convinced that yes, and that's also why I'm here. I think, again, as I said at the beginning, people either take vaccines for granted, that's something you get when you're a child and everybody takes it, but we do see now that even those childhood immunization coverage rates are going down, and we see, new outbreaks coming out. And the problem is, when you see, I saw recently information about a child being hospitalized because he had not one but 2 vaccine preventable disease at the same time. And that child was not an unvaccinated child, but he was a child that had immunodeficiency. And so he had some vaccination, but didn't work as well in him or her, I'm not sure. And so this is also, I think the patient community right, and the patients are the ones that are most at risk, more vulnerable, and yet they don't have a voice in this area, you know? But recently I've heard more and more examples. I heard in a RSV, so bronchiolitis event, a patient who has asthma and her son has asthma and severe asthma. And she said, well, for you, getting RSV as an adult is a little cold. You don't even know that it's RSV. You just know you have a cold. But for people like us, it means hospitalization. It means, you know, months of trying to get back to a balanced state, you know, controlled state, however you call it. So I do think that in general, communities, patient communities have even a stronger voice, but also just general, you know, civil societies also have a strong voice. It's just what the ownership isn't always there. You don't always feel it's my place to talk about this, but I think it is. Anyone who's interested, anyone who's curious, anyone who has, you know, like me, a grandfather that's going to turn 100 years old and is very vulnerable to diseases and has been protected so far. This is why I get flu vaccines every year, for example. You know, I want to protect myself, but also others around me. So I think hearing from people why it matters to them, hearing voices, and that was really interesting in the RBD-COV project. Why do you participate in clinical research? Why do you get vaccinated if you don't participate in research? Or why don't you get vaccinated as well? This is super important. And right now the trust is broken, the discussion is not happening because there's a lot of judgment as well. And I think that's an important topic.
Yeah, it's a very complex question. I think that we can do a lot of things, sharing knowledge. Also, I think that people need to understand what are the consequences of non-vaccination, because we focus the debate on the vaccine, but it's not about the vaccine. It's about all the things that happen after, before the vaccination and for other people. And I think that this is a mindset that is very difficult in our current society, thinking about the global impact of things. And communities will not be able to do it alone. I've been discussing with two healthcare providers, a very famous infectious disease professor in France, for example, whose mother didn't want to get vaccinated. He works in Institut Pasteur. So you see, it means that even healthcare providers working on this are not able to convey a message on the importance of this. And I think that this is where social science can bring some results, because we need to understand what is behind this, because there has always been hesitancy, but then there are other things that are working there, and we need to identify and go to look for what is going to be the right communication. But it seems that the normal communication is not enough. So this doesn't mean that we need to stop this, but we need to try other solutions.
You're right, social science and working together. And that's why this RBD-COV project is a great example, right? You're combining, because as a scientist, right, we're not trained for communication. This is not what we learn. And I always tell young scientists, you know, if you cannot explain the topic of your PhD, why it matters, maybe not the details, but why it matters to your grandma, why are you doing this work? And so we need to learn as scientists to better communicate. And how do we know if people understand what we're talking about? Today, scientists, they talk to each other. They publish in scientific journals, they go to conferences, they talk amongst each other as experts. We see this a little bit with medical professionals as well, but because they work with patients, they are exposed, but still there's communication gaps, right? You talk at someone, not with, you know, you're not having a conversation. So I really think this is a time when it's crucial, and it's crucial for vaccines, it's crucial for all science, all health topics, and I think we can learn this and co-build, and this RBD-COV project and the toolbox it created, I think is a great starting point. but it needs to be a movement. And you know what happens with movements? It's easy to see everyone who doesn't want to be part of the conversation, right? We're a small group today, but you have to build a coalition of the willing. You start with the people who see why it matters, who have personal experiences, and who want to be engaged and involved. And I think with that little core, you can start building something that works and then amplify and amplify. So that for me would be.
And maybe if I can bring also an example that I work a lot with France. There is a group of immunocompromised patients association that have become another association of immunocompromised conditions. And they are running, we are starting a project on vaccination, on the mandatory of vaccination for healthcare providers. And I cannot tell you the difficulties that we are having for obtaining an ethics approval. Because the doctors that are in the ethical committees say, ooh la la, you're getting into a very touchy thing, and it's not up to you to tell to doctors what they need to do. And you know, it's like they are feeling this as a threat, and it's very hard. And so we have done a coalition with Jean-Michel Molina, who is going to help us because he's coming PI with me, you know. But this is because I know him. But so I think that is this network of people who know what we want, that we can move forward, because there are a lot of barriers.
So I understand we're switching things up. We ran late with the presentations, but then we have some really interesting questions. So maybe we just stick with this, right?
Yeah.
So if there's any other questions in the audience, this is about discussion, right? So it's questions or comments or food for thought.
I love the idea of the community advisory boards for clinical trials, thinking about, you know, how often we do similar on the other pharmaceutical side. How scalable, but I do not know the vaccine development process, this is all new to me, but how scalable is it to have something like a community advisory board that wouldn't just be at the global site that's conducting the clinical trial, but at, you know, all the countries that are also doing the trial? I mean, is that something that's scalable in a way that they would be able to give meaningful feedback to what happens at local level, or is that something that really only could happen at a global level, if that makes sense?
I can try to answer. I mean, I don't know if Bea is related to this or no. Going back to the HIV experience, I think we have been able to self-organize very often in terms of community advisory boards. And also the fact that it's initiated from the community side helps to give a bit more of kind of, the fact that it's independently organized, that is started from the community, that really helps. I think we also had some examples where we were working on specific topic like HIV cure. We try to align with partners from other regions of the world. So it is scalable, definitely. It is one of the tools that we have transfers also in other community, with other community partners, and we try to really to replicate as much as possible, because it was really a success story, and it's still the way we are operating nowadays. So yeah, I think in Paradigm, it was another IMI project. We provide the guidelines on how to organize or how to set up a community advisory board, and how the strategies to start it from the community side, from the industry partners, how to create this alliance. So I can also offer this kind of information if you are interested.
I think, Bea, you had a comment?
Yes. Well, I can follow up on comments, Giorgio, and then another from Daniela. So in terms of the international caps, I think it can work. It has. We have examples that there's one international board, but I think it is still always important to have local ones because, I mean, no, we have participated in HIV prevention vaccine trials, and sometimes no, they came from the US, and all the community advisory boards there generated a lot of materials that when they came here to Spain, it was like this doesn't. And we presented them to the local CAP, and they said, "But who has done that?" No, so there are differences in every region. So I think it is a lot of investment. When you do these international big studies, you have to have caps at a global level, but also you need to still have the local ones because the realities in each region may really differ, and they need specific adaptations. And then I wanted to follow up before to Daniela's comments in terms of the immunization programs in healthcare professionals. I totally echo you. I mean, I'm an infectious disease physician. I work in an infectious disease department, and every year when it comes the flu and the COVID vaccination campaign, we have professionals that still say, "No, I don't want to get, and you cannot oblige me," and it's just and we treat people with immune compromising conditions. So I definitely think there's something that we need to do on try to change this. It's true that we cannot go on the obligation if we don't address why there's that denial and why there's the hit and see. So there's a lot of work to do. And one thing that I always try to put on the table is just we live in Europe and we have public healthcare. Every year, the impact that has flu in the health system in terms of hospitalization of the vulnerable population, but also on the health professionals in terms of medical leaves. We don't have enough beds. We don't have we have the emergency rooms totally crowded because of people not being vaccinated. This is just a global health issue that involves everyone. It's everyone's responsibility to try to reduce the impact of the flu, the seasonal flu every year, and this can be reduced by vaccination. So I know that the message that because you get the flu the flu vaccine this year is not covering well the strain that is running, and I'm not getting protecting for infection, so my grandpa is going to get the disease as well, and blah, blah, blah. So it's always very difficult to try to challenge these arguments. So we need to find alternatives because the communication that we have been using so far, it's not working. And when you have healthcare professionals that are not getting vaccination, we are doing it very bad. So we need you to help us doing it better.
Yeah, thank you, Bea. Thank you for sharing this because I'm happy to hear that because there are so many others that don't have this kind of opinion. So it's a global response. And I want to get back what Bea was saying about these community advisory panels. It's great to have them, but then we need someone like Bea. Because you can have this community advisory board or panel or whatever, and then that's not enough at all. I mean, this is a tick the box. What you need is a kind of relationship of partnership that is not so common. So I guess that by now we need to do with this movement of people that are willing to work like this. And I really think that we need to show this experience. And this is something that I shared during this meeting. Is like, for example, I think that we do not produce enough information on how we did it. So now we're going to have the results published of RBD-CoV, but where is the publication telling how we did it? Because we know that people working on vaccines are reading some kind of communications that are scientific publications, and even if it's published, it's not sure that they are going to read it, but at least it will be there and someone is going to read. So I think that when we think about the valorization of the scientific publication needs to take into account not only the result, but the how. And this is something that community needs to invest much more.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Another question?
Just one,
Yeah, please,
sorry.
please.
My brain actually went a little bit recently to the campaigns for HPV implementation around the world, and how recent this is, not proportional at all to the actual urgency for this. I mean, just recently we had, to include men in this, or young boys, etc. So the conversation is quite recent, even for something as important as HPV. Where does your work work in concert with the national campaigns and the health authorities?
So I think the HPV vaccine is a great example because it bridges, communicable disease, non-communicable disease, and long-term impact. And we're just now starting to see a lot of real-world evidence studies that show the impact in different countries. And because immunization decisions are taken at national level, you actually have different cases. It's almost like a scientist would say a natural experiment, right? So there's data that came out of Scotland a few years ago that showed that in young girls vaccinated when they were 12 years old, now X years later, there's actually 0 cancers, cervical cancers, right? And this is massive, massive. I think now it's starting to be included, at European level. There was a council recommendation. There's actually activities now at the European CDC, ECDC level to monitor some of this. And they established a dashboard because still we don't know much. We don't have enough visibility on the vaccine coverage rates in the different populations. And you mentioned boys. It's just recently that we added boys, and for girls, there's now a target at European level, but not for boys. Right? There's no target yet. So I think, it's a mix of European level, national level, in some countries it's regional level that the immunization decisions are being taken. So it's very complex work to actually connect all those dots, right? And I think if you want to include communities, you also need to have that connection at the different levels. So I'm not sure if that answers your question fully, but I also get signals that we're getting towards the end of the session. We're actually over time. This is what happens when you start talking about vaccines, right? So happy to continue the discussion maybe afterwards. I think hopefully it's just the beginning. And I think, I don't know, Laia, if you want to close, but we had identified some questions for reflection. We never got to them, but maybe if you take a picture, that's something you can continue your own reflection on, because it's about, you are an actor in this. Actually, everybody is. You each make decisions for yourself, for your family, for your communities. And so I really hope that we can continue the discussion after the session and in the years to come, right? So let's connect, please.
So yeah, thank you all. We are really happy. Last year we had the first vaccine session on vaccine awareness. This year we took a step forward and we talked about the actual involvement. We learned about vaccines. We had, as Charlotte was mentioning, we had these questions prepared. So we hope that this would be like a third step, so we can continue talking about vaccines in the near future. So thank you all. All the outcomes of the session will be on signups. And thank you all.
Thank you.